want you to beat these gentlemen to death now.
Yo, what the f? That was so up, you guys.
Oh yeah, it is so good to be back with the most diabolical show on TV as we are breaking down the first episode of The Boys Season 4, Episode 1, titled Department of Dirty Tricks. Full spoilers ahead. We open with Victoria celebrating some new victories on the Singer Newman campaign on their path of winning the election. Meanwhile, the boys are there and ready to take down the soon-to-be vice president. Cut to seeing the crew setting their plan into motion as we see Butcher's symptoms from taking V last season are only getting worse as he's throwing up and getting closer to his expiration date. Now you notice that he looks off to the side and he's talking to someone that isn't there, which we'll be discussing a little bit later, but he tells Frenchie and Kimiko that he's fine. Now the boys are prepared to commit treason with their inside connect to get access to Victoria's personal belongings to take her out, as we see Butcher's health puts him on lookout and him being sidelined for any potential action. As we cut to the best villain on TV, Homelander, who's taking a piss and he notices a white pubic hair down there and he looks concerned. Now we later learn that he's actually aging, but that's not going to stop Homelander from setting his plans into motion and taking over the world. Now we see Homelander and Ryan's relationship is continuing to grow as Ryan is afraid to be in a big room with other people, as we see his dad cheers him up by reminding him that
About this. They're only humans and toys for our amusement. That's right.
showing Ryan being nervous to be around other people showed me that he still has effects from being kept tucked away in private with his mom from all those years. Now Homelander wasn't expected to be in attendance and catches everyone by surprise, including Victoria. As she sends her daughter and Ryan to get some ice cream, we see Homelander tells them,
Does nobody come back pregnant? I'm just kidding.
Now Victoria tries to play cool around Homelander and doesn't want any of his endorsements, especially with the trial going on. But Homelander, being Homelander, does what he does best, and that is forcing his way into the situation and makes it seem that him and Victoria are on the same page to the press. I have a feeling that the back and forth between these two characters are going to be epic this season. Meanwhile, against MM's orders, we see Billy makes his move towards Ryan and tries to convince him to leave with him to honor his mom's last wishes, which is to keep him safe, but also to keep him away from Homelander. Which, speaking of, he enters the room and tells Billy,
No means no, William. This isn't the Neverland Ranch.
As we see Homelander mocks Butcher after using his x-ray vision to see the mass on Butcher's brain, which is killing him. Now, even though we see Ryan leaves with his dad, there was a look of concern on his face when he heard that Butcher was dying, which to me kind of points towards this season planting the seeds that Ryan will most likely turn on his dad and probably rejoin Butcher at some point. Now back to the mission to kill Victoria, we see Frenchie and Kimiko head into a room and places what we later learn to be acid as they replace this with her eye drops, but her daughter Zoe comes in and uses her new powers of tentacles with very sharp teeth that come out of her mouth as she brutally kills the guards. Now Zoe starts to attack Frenchie, but Kimiko steps in only to get her arm ripped into pieces, but she manages to kick Zoe off of her. As they rush to an exit, Starlight tells them where to jump out for she can try to catch them, but Kimiko misses because her arm is now growing and it almost reminded me of the baby arm from Deadpool 2, which was hilarious, as Starlight only manages to catch Frenchie, but Kimiko lands right on her face, leaving a bloody mess, but she's okay. While all that was happening, Veronica finds Huey in the van. As Huey calls her out for turning her daughter into a monster, as he puts it, but she felt it was the right call in order to keep her safe. As they reminisce about old times back in season 2, back when they were close friends, we see Vic admits that she did care for him, but we see that Huey was only stalling as he throws what I assume was what was in the eye drops, which was acid, but that does nothing to her. Now Huey threatens to out her information from the Red River, but she reminds him that if he tries to out her out, she'll make sure to kill everybody he's ever loved. As Vic tries to make a truce with him, but Butcher comes behind her and shoots her in the head, and yet again, it has no effect. Now after a failed assassination, getting into a fight with her daughter, throwing acid into her face, and shooting her in the back of the head, this got me thinking, why on earth is she keeping them alive? Because we all know she could have easily popped off their heads, but I think she's playing the long game and keeping them alive for a backup plan against Homelander, because why else would she not kill them? Now after this failed mission, Butcher and MM meet up with Grace, but she doesn't let Billy in and she tells him,
There are people who, because of ignorance or maybe insanity, still believe you have something to contribute.
as we see Butcher tells her that he promises to get Ryan back. Now, to my surprise, we find out the soon-to-be newly appointed president was the one behind the assassination. Now, we find out in this scene that MM is now in charge of the boys as he gets his orders to not screw up again and taking out Newman by any means necessary. Now, I could be wrong, but what if that intel that MM got, the bad intel, was actually from Victoria herself? What if she gave them misinformation to find out who's trying to kill her? Now, it also wouldn't surprise me if Victoria is playing clueless to Singer for now, but once he's in office, she'll most likely kill him to go from vice president to president. Now, outside with Butcher, we officially meet Jeffrey Dean Morgan's character, who goes by the name of Joe Kessler. As they catch up and talk about old times, we see Billy tells him that he'll be back as the leader of the boys in a matter of time, and he also shares that he feels as though Grace's focus shouldn't be on Newman, but on Homelander, especially after killing someone in public and getting an applause from the crowd. Now, Joe brings up what happened at the finale with Butcher stopping Soldier Boy from killing Homelander and questions if Billy's priorities are actually straight. Now, regardless of Butcher's mistake, we see Joe tells him how much he's needed before the Supes decide to take over. Now, switching focus on the main plot and talking about the side plots in this episode, which honestly I found to be the weakest part of this premiere. Now, starting with MM, he learns that his daughter is acting out in school as well as at home after Todd had left and his ex wants him to find Todd. Which later in the episode, we see MM, Frenchie, and Kimiko tagging along with him to find Todd, which they do, and we'll tie that back at the end. Now, honestly, I hope that there's a lot more to MM this season because I'm a big fan of that character. Now, besides him dealing with the aftermath of what actually happens to Todd in this episode, I really do hope that they let him lead the team for most of the season before inevitably giving the leadership up back to Billy. Now, besides the opening, the boys aren't really that much together in this episode, and we get to see that the team wants Butcher gone, but Huey's the only one that disagrees. So it's going to be interesting to see how long Huey's going to defend Butcher for the rest of the season, and if they're going to inevitably kick him out of the boys. Now, the plot that I felt was very underwhelming and just kind of random was seeing Starlight wanting to rebrand herself as Annie and Frenchie's new love interest. Now, at Starlight's headquarters, we see Annie really doesn't want to use the Starlight persona anymore, and she wants to use her powers for better after quitting the Seven in last season. Now, for most of this episode during Starlight scenes, the show would cut to this social media influencer Soup by the name of Firecracker, who's said to be a parody of the X-Men character Jubilee. Now, Firecracker could be seen in the trailers of this new season, and it appears that she probably eventually joins the Seven at some point, and maybe she becomes the replacement of Starlight, and seeing her calling Starlight out on social media might set up this beef between the two characters. Now, talking about Frenchie, we see that he recommended an old friend by the name of Colin, who he met at AA, as he's now a volunteer at the Starlight house, and we see that they had a past relationship, and Kimiko sees this as well. And last but not least, we have the Huey plot. Now, his dad is taken to the hospital in this episode after suffering a stroke, and Huey feels bad because he was ignoring his call throughout the episode as he sits by his bedside for most of the second half of this premiere. Now, clearly, this is just the first episode, and they're laying the groundwork for what's to come, but the way it was presented just felt like it lacked a punch, it lacked a flair. It felt like these characters were just repeating similar storylines from the previous season, and it just felt like they were going through the motions. Now, if you've been watching my breakdowns of all the seasons of The Boys, I've personally never been the biggest fan of the Huey character. Now, I understand the purpose of the character. He's pretty much the audience point of view and being thrown to the chaos, but I've always felt that his arc ended back in season 2. Now, the same thing could be said about Frenchie, who, by the way, I like him as a character, but the show just sometimes doesn't seem to know what to do with him. So we'll see what happens with MM and Starlight. I'm going to be optimistic. Again, I know this is the first episode. These are just side plots, and they're going to probably get better. But again, I just felt like whenever we cut to these side characters and these side plots, you felt the show's momentum slow down drastically. Now, bringing it back to the main plot, we see Homelander having a nightmare about terrible things that he's done over the past 4 seasons, but we get these really quick shots of some red metal door and this woman screaming. Now, was that red door and the woman somehow a part of his past when he was being experimented on, and was that woman his mom? As we get a glimpse of his day-to-day routine, we see that he's clearly bored of it all. From his trial, to meeting at VOT, to watching Annie talking bad about him on television, we see him sitting in on a meeting held by Ashley with the remaining members of the Seven, as they're watching a TV interview with the Deep as he's discussing this octopus relationship that's a controversy right now, and we get a very hilarious Amber Heard joke.
By a jilted and emotionally unstable, hysterical woman who, let's be clear, pooped in my bed.
Now, for those like myself who watched Gen V, we get our very first reference to the end events of the finale as Ashley thanks Homelander for saving her from the massacre at Godolkin University. Now, Ashley informs Homelander that the board thinks that it's time to recruit new members to join the Seven. But before moving on, can we talk about and start to get the theories going in the comments below? Who in the hell is the new Black Noir? Because obviously we know in season 3 that Homelander killed him. Now, I know a lot of people in my comment section of my Gen V breakdowns thought that Sam would probably be the new Black Noir, but I was never in that camp. As we'll later discuss, we actually hear the voice of the new Black Noir, and that clearly isn't Sam, and it's also someone that I don't think we've heard their voice before. As Homelander dismisses half of the candidates Ashley brings up, we see Sister Sage, who is the smartest person in the world, being talked about. Now, Homelander is just so tired of being around idiots, as he puts it, but he wants to prove a point as he calls an audible and tells the Deep to pleasure A-Train, and he's not joking. As we see, A-Train is told to stand up, he takes his pants down, the Deep goes up to him and he says,
Sex is just a spectrum, right, bro?
I thought it was so funny seeing Ashley loving every single second of that, but we see Homelander stops this and tells them that nobody has the balls to actually challenge him and tell him no. Now again, comment below your thoughts, your theories, and your predictions on who the new Black Noir is, and for my comic book fans, I don't think it's who you all think it might be, but we'll save that for another discussion. But more importantly, if Homelander didn't stop the Deep, do you all think that he would have did what he requested? We have this secret meeting taking place as Butcher called Newman to discuss how they can help one another. Now, Butcher wants her help in getting Ryan back, but we get yet another Gen V reference as he tells her that he knows about the soup-killing virus that was made at Godolkin in that first season of Gen V. Now, the deal is that he'll keep her filled in on any action coming her way from the boys or the CIA, and in return, she'll give him access to the virus to make it stronger to take out Homelander and eventually get Ryan back. Now, before the agreements takes place, she wants him to get information from Huey about what he has on her from the Red River files as a sign of good faith, and we see that he gets this information later in the episode by stealing it off of Huey. As Homelander continues to pluck his white pubic hairs and puts it in a glass jar, which by the way, is him keeping this some type of weird souvenir, or is he doing this for something else and maybe creating a better version of himself? As Homelander looks over the candidates, he keys in on Sister Sage. Now, the most shocking moment and honestly the most oddest moment of this entire episode is seeing Homelander in street clothes as he pays a visit to Sage. He makes her show him how smart she is as she calls out all his insecurities by just taking one look at him. Which, by the way, is exactly what he was looking for earlier in the meeting, for someone to step up and not be afraid to call him out. Now, we find out in this scene that Homelander is indeed aging, but he's also going through an existential midlife crisis. Now, Homelander needs some advice for her, as she can tell that he isn't happy, even though he has all the things to his disposal in the world. Now, this becomes a bit of a therapy session for Homelander and her, as he asks her if she was him, what would she do if she was the most powerful being on Earth, and what would she do if she was in his situation? Now, before leaving, Homelander tells her that he wants her to join the Seven, and if she does join the Seven, he wants to put her skills to practice, and he'll listen to her on his path on taking rule on a global scale with her by his side. Now, Sage does accept Homelander's offer, and the first thing that she does is gathering his most devoted fans, and that includes Todd. Now, this fan meetup isn't exactly what they were hoping for, as we see Homelander has Deep, Black Noir, and A-Train get baseball bats, and he wants them to beat them to death, which we see them do, and we see Todd ends up getting murdered in the process. Now, as they're told to wait for further instructions by Sister Sage, we see that Black Noir tells them what's on his mind. Now, we end this episode with seeing Homelander's verdict being not guilty, as Sage sets off a fight between the Homelanders and the Starlighters. Now, was it me, or did this scene kind of feel off? Like, the pacing, the stakes, the characters that were involved, it just didn't work for me. Like, from seeing Frenchie kissing Colin in the middle of this fight to seeing Annie's friend getting beat up, I get the point of the scene, but I just thought the execution was just poor. Now, the plan is set as the 3 dead bodies are planted by A-Train in the middle of this fight to make it look like they were killed in the process of this accident, as we see the Starlighters are being blamed for these murders. Now, MM saw Sage at the fan meetup, and he's able to put 2 and 2 together, and he knows that she was involved, and now he's going to have her eyes on her for the rest of this season. Now, at Homelander's penthouse, we see Ryan going back to the start of this episode and tells his father that he doesn't want Butcher to die, as Ryan brings up that his mom loved him, and Homelander tells him,
What about you?
Now, I want to go back and talk about what Homelander said to Ryan before that, and what did he mean exactly when he said,
Do everything together until we almost merge into one.
Now again, with the whole secret stash of his pubes, but also this whole idea of him setting the stage of taking over the world, Is Homelander thinking about creating a better version of himself? Now we see the Deep has actually kept his octopus lover in his closet as they plan to escape one day. By the way, I don't know if you all know and stuck around to the end credits, but the person that plays the voice of the octopus is the one and only Tilda Swinton. We cut to Frenchie, who's weirded out from seeing a photo from Colin and his family, which makes me think that something happened in their past, either directly with Colin or someone of his family, so it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Which, speaking of family, we see Huey with his dad, who's recovering from his stroke. As he's saying his goodbyes, his mom just pops up out of nowhere, which we know back in season 1, Huey said that he hasn't been around his mom in years, so it's going to be interesting to see that new dynamic. And by the way, the credits revealed that his mom is being played by Rosemary DeWitt, so it's going to be really interesting to see if she's a good mom, a bad mom, and more importantly, where has she been this whole time? Now, at the very end, it's revealed that Billy was talking to Rebecca this whole time throughout the episode. Now, this hallucination version of Rebecca tells Butcher that there's a better way of figuring things out than just screwing over his friends, but he tries to tell her that it's too late, but she disappears. Now, I don't know if she's going to reappear throughout the rest of the season or if it's the last time we're going to see that character, but he ends up making the right decision as he sends the files over to Newman only for her to open it up to find someone's butthole. Overall, I thought the opening scene in this episode was great, and seeing the existential stuff that Homelander was going through, like that stuff was fantastic. Butcher's path of redemption is going to be very interesting this season. I'm really excited to see how him and Joe are going to collaborate, and also fingers crossed that we get more Soldier Boy. But everything outside the main plot just kind of fell flat for me, and this to me is the weakest premiere episode of all the 4 seasons. Now, by no means am I saying this was a terrible episode of The Boys, it's just that the bar is set so high, and all the premiere episodes have been fantastic, and this being the return premiere episode was just okay to me. But either way, I am super excited for the rest of this season. I'm literally about to watch episodes 2 and 3 on this premiere night, and I could change my tone completely after watching these next 2 episodes. And seeing after what happens in this episode of them setting up Veronica maybe being the president, her being against Homelander this season, who's on this path of world domination. But hey, let's find out what happens next, so make sure to check out my breakdown on the next 2 episodes, but also consider sticking around and subscribing to the channel because I will be covering this show for the rest of the season. Thank you all for watching this breakdown. Make sure to share your thoughts about this episode in the comments below, from your pros, your cons, your favorite moments, your thoughts, your theories, and your predictions. You all are awesome, and I'll catch you all on the next video.
Yeah.